Sports Minutes with Raushan.
Money FM 89.3. It's time for Sports Minutes with me, Raushan. Now today we are joined by a man who's done more than just change results. He's tried to change mindsets. Peter de Roo, the Dutchman who turned Balestier Khalsa into one of the most watchable sides in the Singapore Premier League, is now calling time on his stint here. But following up on his hard-hitting exit interview with the Straits Times' Deepan Rajaganesan, he now joins me in the Sports Minute studio to talk about his Tigers tenure, his frustrations having been part of the fraternity for close to 3 years, and his observations of the systemic issues hampering Singapore football. Peter, a huge welcome to Sports Minutes. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm good. Thank you very much.
Very excited to have you, ideally in better circumstances, but nonetheless, you are leaving Balestier. Before we talk about your departure, let's talk about the start. When you took over at Balestier, they weren't particularly known for their inspiring brand of football, right? What then made you believe that this is a challenge you wanted to take on?
Well, I saw 2 games before I decided to accept for the last 3 months, knowing that with the existing group it was always going to be hard. But I also thought it was maybe good for myself, but also for the club to, in 3 months get a feeling for each other, and then who knows. For me it was good to see if the club actually had any ambition, because that was hard for me to judge. It looked like a club who, when I came, that more or less accepted his faith, and the atmosphere within the club was almost making me depressed. But along the way, after 3 months, I had the feeling that maybe it was possible to not only change the way of playing, but I think it was important to also change the way we think, to raise the bar in our attitude and the way we communicate with each other. Raise the bar in professionalism, knowing that the club works with limited resources. But I think if I speak to players and talk about raising the bar and be better than yesterday, and at the same time it can't be that I walk out of the dressing room looking at me, coach, what are you talking about? They need to see the club change their attitude too. Actually, it needs to be driven by the club and then within the dressing room. But we need to lead by example. And again, knowing that the club had limited resources in the 3 months, I thought, okay, I think we can now change the group, look at the players that fit in the way we want to play, but also in terms of attitude, and get a better dynamics in the dressing room. And that's where it started.
Yeah, it started there. You had that interim tenure, and then you decided to take on the role full-time. Here we are, 2 fourth-place finishes later, which is historic for a club like Balestier, right? I want to zoom in on that point you made with the Straits Times in terms of taking a 60% pay cut. I hear your answer in the first question in terms of believing in the project and wanting to make change, but a 60% pay cut is a massive personal hit. Why did you decide that money is not my motivation at the moment?
Well, it actually has never been my motivation, not even as a player. Obviously, we all want to be paid well, but I always wanted to be paid what I thought I was worth. So I remember that I extended my contract as a club captain at my last club, actually. It was not about what I wanted to earn. It was, for me, I'm probably one of the most important players here, so I also want to be paid the most. But what that exactly was. But now I'm as a coach driven by other things, and to be honest, this made the article. It would have never been something that I brought up. The journalist asked me, and I gave an honest answer. But I think the most important part of my answer is that I'm in a position where in a week I influence more people than some people do in their lifetime, and I want to do that the best I can. And whenever people have worked with me and they get asked the question when they're 50 or 60 years, who inspired to be where you are or who you are, I want them to mention my name, and not because I have a big ego, because I think that is something that's worth much more than money.
No, I absolutely love that. You talked about honesty, you talked about influence. Those are 2 things we're going to unpack when we talk about the wider issues in Singapore football. But coming back to your decision to leave Balestier Khalsa, right? You mentioned it's better to leave 2 months too early than to stay on. What then made you decide to leave the club now? Was it Darwin leaving as well?
Darwin leaving obviously didn't help because I think, and I said this before, I think we couldn't have achieved what we did without Darwin. I think he was instrumental, but I also spoke to Darwin already before he left. He was probably the first one that, there was a good chance that I would not, and I explained actually the same as I did the other day, that the first thing is I thought about this already last year because, again, if in Singapore, as opposed to where I come from, if in Singapore football you do well with a club, then it doesn't automatically mean that your budget goes up. I mean, it's hard to generate more income, but at the same time, if you do well, everybody wants to earn more money, and I understand that. I would have been the same, and that's how it works. But if the budget doesn't go up and players want to earn more, then it's going to become very hard to constantly meet the expectations because they will go up. And last year, I thought there was still room in terms of how I want to play. I knew there was still a little bit of room in being a little bit more aggressive defending forwards. So in some positions, I thought, if we're creative, we can do maybe better for the same amount of money. So that is what happened. But I think now we come at the stage where it becomes very, very hard. And sometimes you then have to make a rational decision and not an emotional decision because I love the club. I've had a great time. I love the players. But sometimes you got to know when it's time to go. And that's what I meant with if you stay too long, it goes wrong. You don't meet the expectations. People get frustrated. And at least now I can leave and always come back being proud.
Yeah, not burning any bridges, trying to make that decision with your head rather than your heart, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And because, look, I still loved every single day. I don't even see it as work. So.
And you talked about the financial frustrations, right? If I can just dive a little deeper, do you think that's a club issue or an association issue?
Probably a bit of both. And a lot of the clubs are not privatized. It's going to be a big challenge to actually make that happen. I've been in Malaysia where they already start trying that 5-6 years ago, and still a lot of clubs have not really made that step. The disadvantage of that I wouldn't say it's the same situation as in Malaysia, but the club is also not being run by professionals, and I think that makes a hell of a difference. And this is my honest belief. I think Singaporeans are actually mad about football. There is a lot of football supporters, but I think they lost faith in the local competition and maybe even in the national teams, in local football in general. But the people that love football are there, so there is still a market that you can tap in. And I sometimes wonder whether it's the clubs or the association, if we do well enough, if we are passionate enough, if we are fearless enough to make bold choices. Because if you want to get there, it requires a fundamental change in how we do things and how we operate. And by nature, people don't like change. People want to be comfortable, but to get it right requires fundamental changes, and it requires tough people.
Peter, when you speak, your experience comes through, but at the same time, your frustration comes through as well. My next question is, do you feel, having spent close to 3 years in Singapore football, you were almost trying to fix something that didn't want to be fixed?
I'm not sure, but there is sort of frustration because I look at the coaches in Singapore and then I'm thinking, and I look at coach education, I think our coaches deserve better and they deserve more. If they get better and they get more, our players, our young players will get more and get what they deserve. But because the fact that coaching is probably not at the level here where it should be, that's not the fault of the coaches, because being a good coach or not is not that doesn't depend on where you were born. There is as much talented coaches here as anywhere else. The problem is the opportunity. It lacks the opportunity. I mean, to get to your potential, to develop to your potential as a coach, obviously you need to have talent. Well, like I said, that's not determined by where you were born. Obviously, you need attitude, but without opportunity, it's also very hard. And opportunities is youth competitions to develop, but it's also high quality coach education, and that's just one thing. There is so so much things that I think we can do better. But yeah, it requires people that are prepared to make tough choices and understand what it actually takes. Because I looked at the last election. This problem is not going to be fixed by money. It has to do with a long-term vision and being brave enough to pick people to get things done and are qualified for what they need to do.
And I have a natural follow-up to that because we are standing on the cusp of a new leadership for the Football Association of Singapore. You talked about money not fixing everything. You need the right people in the right places, right? It almost seems from the outside that this new exco that's been put together has the money and possibly has the decision making because based on what they've done with the Lion City Sailors. Would you agree with that, or do you think there's more to it?
No, I don't know the politics of it. I have no idea, but the way people think that Forrest Lee is the new is going to fix everything, I think you underestimate what's being needed. Obviously you need money, but money without a proper plan, without being able to make bold choices in areas where they need to be made, money with a plan means nothing.
Let's talk about
without a plan, sorry.
Absolutely. And let's talk about that plan there. Based on your observations, do you just feel in Singapore there's a need to take the safe option rather than try something bold, try something new? Because why affect the status quo?
That's true, but I think it's also a little bit more complicated maybe, as I say, because I do think the infrastructure is here. I mean, it's like a golden situation that you have so many people in very close proximity, so every young kid can find a club. That's a luxury that you don't have in a lot of other countries. At the same time, I think there's too many people involved in football, whether it's the Ministry of Sport or other people. I do think that elite youth football should be on the FAS. So it's very hard to make decisions now that make an impact. I mean, you hire a technical director who should be answerable for elite youth football, but is he?
That's a very fair question. I thought you were going to follow up to that. That's why I kept quiet. We'll talk about the technical director in a short while because to my understanding, his contract might be running out very soon. But let's talk about specific issues for a bit just to ease the conversation slightly. Two issues you raised in particular were time wasting and low ball in play in the SPL, right?
Yeah.
From a coach's perspective, why do you think these are not just small issues but the catalyst to bigger issues?
See, I think we have an obligation, the clubs, but also the coaches, and I also think the national governing body, to make sure that we make our competition more attractive and that we are a positive example and a positive role model of the people that watch our game. In the end, we play for the people that watch. So I think I see a lot of things around me, and one of them is time wasting, which I think, that shouldn't be happening. Football should be positive, and I think that we can do much more about it. And I've raised this quite a few times because there's other countries where they had these issues, and there shouldn't be 12 to 40 minutes net playing time difference between any competition in Europe and here. We can easily fix that. And that's just one example. But I think we need to be thinking more outside the box to make sure that when we get supporters, that we keep them and grow them rather than and I think it's also, we're all adults, right? We're also an example for young children, and they should not think that is the norm, because it's not.
And you talked about raising these issues in indoor conversations in terms of time wasting or low ball in play, the minutes that the ball is in play, right? What was your response then? Because more often than not, I see on social media there's pictures of coaches getting together with the association. I'm guessing things like this are discussed. What was the response you got when you raised these issues?
No, I must say the only person who always supported me in that was Yoshinaga from Albirex, and that's not a surprise. Kevin was a little bit more quiet, but I know that he agrees with me, and it's not a coincidence that we reach 50 minutes or more against Albirex and against Tampines, because I don't think that they are an example of that either. And to be honest, when I was in Australia with the national youth teams, it was the same. It was close to 40 minutes in youth teams, goalkeepers going down 12 times in a half. And then the most playing time was always Australia versus Japan. That's how it should be.
Absolutely. And there's so much to unpack when we talk about issues with the league. Time wasting is just the tip of the iceberg. Another hot rod I have to touch on is the refereeing. refereeing. We are speaking quite soon after that Singapore Cup semi-final where refereeing once again came under scrutiny. I'm not going to ask you specifically about that incident, but just your take on refereeing having been in the league for so long.
I always find it very, very hard to talk about referees because, yes, I've seen things that I don't understand. And not long ago, we had a referee who completely lost his temper to players. He didn't have himself under control. I'm more than happy to say something about that. But let's not talk about the mistakes they make because we all make them. I make them every single day and also during a game. And that's part of football. And VAR sometimes doesn't make it easier or better. I do think that we need to look at a little bit more, if we can get a little bit more cameras, and we need to make sure, again, supporters don't have to wait 5, 6, 8 minutes on decisions. But look, they have introduced it last season for the first time, and I think a couple of times we gave some feedback, and I think that's a work in progress. And yeah, and referees, like I said, referees make mistakes. It's part of the game. My players make mistakes. I make mistakes, and to be honest, sometimes I see something on the pitch and I look at it later and think, oh, I didn't see that right. You know, that's part of football, and it's also something that I can't control. We can only control what we do, and that is we want to be positive and you know, not get involved with referee decisions either. And obviously, if my players time-based, they know I'm going to put them in the stand or they're going to sit next to me because I don't accept it.
It would be a miss of me, though, not to ask about that referee you spoke about.
Yeah.
You don't have to mention names, but how shocking was it that you witnessed a referee not being able to conduct himself in a way that a referee should?
My first response was, okay, he starts shouting now. That means he doesn't know it anymore. That was my first response. And I think he is leading 22 players and he needs to manage the game. And I don't think standing at 1 meter from a player and, like, you know, shout the way he did, I don't think that's going to help. It's going to escalate.
Absolutely.
And the same with the time wasting. I've seen games where it happens after 20 minutes. Why do you wait with a yellow card till it's 88? I just don't get it.
And you raised that point about education for coaches. Do you think there needs to be education for refereeing as well?
I think they will get educated, and to be honest, I've been at AVS a few times and saw what they do with the referees, and they constantly get feedback. And to be honest, last year I actually was called to AVS together with Sassi. That was before he left, of course. He got a second yellow card, and actually the referee admitted that because he was frustrated, he gave him a yellow card, which was possibly not what he should have done. And he let the situation escalate. And that's why Ismail got frustrated, but he still didn't really say anything. And to be fair to the referee, we came there and he apologized. And I think that's class. There's nothing wrong with admitting a mistake. I think that shows that you have class.
And I think admitting a mistake is the first step to making any credible change, right?
I would say so, because if you're stubborn and you want to pretend you didn't, yeah, you probably won't get better. No, but I thought that was a good thing. It doesn't make you a weak referee if you tell somebody you made a mistake. We all do. I would look at that. I'm thinking that's a sign of strength. Players respect it. The only thing is, and now it's still a yellow card. You're still suspended. But no. But I thought that was good. I thought that was good.
Thank you for sharing that, Peter, because I think the listeners don't really get such information of what goes on behind. They see the 90 minutes on the broadcast and they think it ends there, but there's so much more to it. You talked about going to the FAS for that conversation. Indulge me slightly, right? Let's say you are made technical director of the FAS. What are your top 3 priorities in terms of changes that you would address?
A uniform playing style for national teams. Obviously, the first team national team coach is results driven. The rest of the team should be development driven. So I think that only one playing style is suitable, as they're being proactive. The senior coach is being paid to get results, and he should be able to do that the way what he believes in. I do think that if you do believe in a certain philosophy, that it helps that it is in line. I mean, we had in Australia at some point, I was already there, but then we had Ans Postecoglou, who became head coach of the national team. Yeah, that was for me brilliant, because we share the same philosophy on. So it was all the way through from our age group. team still till ends. It was the same sort of football, the same sort of language. So that's probably one thing. But I think most important thing is youth development and coach education. Coach education being number one.
You talked about having that similar playing style throughout from national team as well as the age group teams, right? You've obviously had conversations with our current head coach, the national team head coach, Sutomo Ogura. Do you think he is doing the right things behind the scenes to try and make that vision possible?
Well, obviously I'm not behind the scenes, but I do think that he's trying to get a little bit closer to that, like playing without fear and having a go and these type of things. And at the same time, you also, you got to look at the players that you have available as well. You can't ask players to do something that they can't do. That would be. But at the same time, I did it at Balestier too when I started, because it was for me the only way to see whether they, maybe not now, but do they have the potential to become that player or not? I do think that there has been some glimpses of what he's trying to do. So I don't think he's too far in what he believes from that either.
Yeah, but again, it's not a one man to fix the thing kind of issue, right?
No, of course not.
And that brings me to my next question. We talked about the technical director. The man currently in the position is Michael Brown, and his contract, to my understanding, might be up for extension soon. He might or might not stay on. Based on everything you've said, everything you've experienced in terms of work abroad, is that a role at all you will consider to contribute to Singapore football?
No, I would love to contribute to Singapore football. I love my time here, and but no, not in that role. No.
Why not? What would stop you? Would it be the bureaucracy? Would it be the policies? Or would it be...
No, maybe. But look, I think when I came here, a lot of people said, well, he's a technical director, which is partly true because I was there for 4 years. What people don't realize that with 7 years with the national teams, I was on the field every single day. I quit football in 2001. I started as a coach. Only in my last 3 seasons, I was technical director at Cambuur, but the first 2, I was on the pitch. So I'm a footballer first, and then by nature, I'm a head coach. I'm a little bit worried to, if I take a technical director's job, that I sort of almost get branded as a technical director, which I'm not, or not per se. And to be honest, that role as technical director made me a better coach, in my opinion. But I've enjoyed being on the field again, and I think to be successful as a TD in Singapore, I'm not sure whether that's gonna be a job that at the moment. I think that's going to be extremely hard because you had a few technical directors here. I remember when I started in Malaysia, Michel Soblon was here, technical director, and I don't know how he did his job here, how well he understands that you need to adapt when you work overseas. You can't do if I do this things the same as I do them in Holland, or talk to people even the same thing I do in Holland, I will never be successful. I need to adapt without compromising on the things that I believe in. I don't know how well he did that part, but you can't say that he's a bad technical director. I mean, he's responsible for the golden generation. He wrote the plan. I know him very well. I think he's very capable. And if people like that do not succeed, I think you need to look in the mirror and ask yourself why not. Because I think that's where probably the problem is.
You give so much context and you balance it with real life examples, and I respect that a lot. I have to ask, in terms of you say no to a technical director role because you don't want to be shoehorned into that, what next then for Peter de Roo?
Well, I haven't really gave that much thought because, that's maybe a little bit the sort of person I am. I first make a decision on what I'm going to do with a contract that runs out, and after that we'll see what happens, because the last thing I want is, me already looking for other opportunities while I'm still on the contract somewhere. For me, that was first things first. I told the chairman 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think it's now out in the open and the things have settled down a bit. Season is finished. So we'll see what happened. Honestly, nothing on the table, or no.
When we started this conversation, in the first few questions you mentioned you want to leave a legacy such that when the players look back 10, 20, 30 years from now, do you want to think of Peter de Roo as someone who shaped them, right? You said you love Balestier Khalsa. When you look back on your time here, what's one moment that will really stand out?
This is probably the only one question I needed to prepare for. The first thing that comes to mind now is that after the game, my son came to me and said, wow, you don't see a lot of times that coaches leave a club like this. But for me, the nicest part was actually that before the game, players made a video where they all had a message for me. And to be honest, the things that they said, made me extremely proud of the work we had done. And and then after the game, having that chat with my son, I was thinking, maybe I did the right thing, because there's not a lot of times that you leave a club like this. And if there's anything that stands out is the messages from the players and the whole, even from the supporters during the game. But obviously that is from the outside. These players work with me day in, day out, and I'm sure a lot of them have cursed me out as well on many times. But even players that I probably have disappointed many times by not playing them or whatever. No, that was good. Yeah.
Peter, decisions have been made, announcements have been made as well. But if at all one thing could have convinced you to stay with Balestier Khalsa, what would it be?
Well, like I said, I love the boys, love the club. If I would have a feeling that we can again grow and improve, and then maybe being able to do that again with Darwin, then maybe.
And I have to ask you this final question, because you stand for much more than Balestier Khalsa. You have said things for the betterment of Singapore football, right? And one quote that I really liked from your conversation with Deepan is, look where Singapore was then in the 60s and 70s and where they are now as a city. What is stopping us from copying that template or using that template as inspiration for football?
It's actually beyond me, because this was just a quote, but I've been looking a lot at documentaries from your first Prime Minister. And the other day I was speaking to somebody, and it was about city planning. How far you look ahead. You look ahead towards a generation that's not even born yet. And the plan, it's so far ahead and so meticulous. And I'm thinking, if you're capable of doing that, and if you see where you were in 66 or 70 and where you are now, that's a tremendous change. I don't think there's any country in the world that made that sort of progress in that short amount of time. And then I look at football, I'm thinking, why not? Like 25 years ago, you were dominating football in Southeast Asia. Did you fell asleep? That's almost impossible with that mentality. But maybe it takes a leader like you had back then as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
A strong leader with a vision.
With iron in him, I believe. That's
exactly.
what the listeners would agree to as well. Promise, this is the final question with all things you've said, right? Is this bye-bye or is this be right back?
No, for me, always be back. I probably won't be far away. I haven't left yet. I think what I said earlier, I made a lot of friends here, enjoyed my time. I think Singapore is a very welcoming city and a nice city to be in. And like I said, the way I left Balestier Khalsa, there for sure will be moments where I come back and watch and see how they're doing.
Well, I'll be watching that space very, very closely. Peter Di Roo may be leaving Balestier Khalsa, but he's leaving behind a challenge to Singapore football to think bigger, act braver, and finally step outside the comfort zone. In the current climate where comfort seems to trump change, his departure is a sharp reminder the game doesn't grow unless someone's willing to rock the boat. Peter, thank you for being that voice and doing just that. All the best for what lies ahead.
Thank you for having me.
Sports Minutes on Money FM 89.3.